Hello and welcome. Today's video is a process of me completing my art journal adventures prompt, a reference to time. I begin creating my background using Tim Holtz's new Distress Oxides. I've linked all the products I've used in the description box below and also on my blog, blog.craft.ninja. The colors I'm using to start off with are Cracked Pistachio, Walnut Stain, and Fired Brick. Now just smoosh, because that is a technical term, smoosh these inks down onto your craft mat or whatever non-porous surface you're using. I'm using a silicone baking mat, but you can use whatever you want. Spray the smooshed inks with water from a misting bottle, and then just take your untreated paper, don't gesso it, press it down and drag it through the ink to create fun textures and color interactions. Dab and spray your paper with water and use your heat tool to zap it to freeze that cool color interactions. I'm just playing around and having fun. Do whatever feels right. There really isn't a wrong way to do this. I've added more ink to my mat in Vintage Photo, Fossilized Amber, and Cracked Pistachio again. Just keep layering and spraying and heat setting as you go. I also used a water brush to kind of fine-tune the interactions a bit. Keep the heat tool on while you're misting and dripping water to kind of freeze those really cool effects that you get. Now on to stamping the background for a second layer, if you will. First, I'm going to be stamping with Distress Oxide and Walnut Stain, and I'm using Tim Holtz's collection from Stampers Anonymous called Life's Possibilities, and I'm using the clock from that set. Immediately after stamping the clock image, I just sprayed water on the clock to distress it and blend it into the background a bit. Take your heat gun as well to kind of freeze that distressing, but because you don't want to obliterate that clock completely, but you want to blending, melting into the background. Twist and turn the page to kind of get those drips going around on the page, and then use your heat gun to freeze that really cool drippiness. I took my water brush to the clock to obscure it just a little bit more to achieve the look that I was going for. Now, as I'm drawing, I'm reading about graphics rub-ons. I'll get to that later, and I'll let you know it did not go as planned. The next stamp I'm using is also from Tim Holtz's collection for Stampers Anonymous. These are cling stamps, and they are called Curiosities. I'm using the clock from this collection as well. I wonder if there could be a theme here. Maybe because the journal entry is a reference to time. I stamped the second generation stamps into my creative journal just to kind of keep track of what I was doing that day. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see a video of my creative journal, like a flip through or a process video. Moving on to the third stamp that I'm using, it is also a clock stamp, but this one is from Art C. I believe you can get it from Michael's. It doesn't really have a great description name. What I got from Michael's website was adhesive stencils and clear stamps border strips. So there you go. Spray and dry and heat set to your heart's content. And And now we're moving on to stenciling. I'm using Distress inks, this time in Hickory Smoke and Black Soot. I am applying the ink nicely through the stencil with my sponge daubers from the Creative Company. Link in the description box below. I'm using a little bit of post-it note tape on the side of the stencil to prevent over stenciling and to hold my stencil in place. The stencil that I'm using is by Tim Holtz, and it is called Clockwork. When using the sponge dauber, try to go in an up and down motion, not back and forth. If you go back and forth, you will kind of get a blurry image, and the small parts will kind of get stuck on that sponge. So just be careful. This is a little bit more of an intricate stencil, so you don't want to bend or break your stencil. Once you've finished stenciling that, mist it with water, let it drip and heat set. Do whatever you feel looks good. For the second stenciled clock face I am using walnut stain in addition to the black soot. Once you've stenciled your second clock face, I went ahead and misted it and zapped it with my heat tool. And there we go. We have a rustically beautiful background. Now this is kind of where everything went off the rails. My goal was to create rub-ons with the text of a quote to go on my background, and then that would be my art journal entry. But dealing with mishaps and not quite understanding which direction my printer fed, it didn't turn out well. As you can see, it wasn't caught on video, but I did try to do some rub-on, and it tore the paper. I tried to go ahead and press through. Things just weren't going as planned. I ended up writing with a paint pen. I included this part because I wanted to show that it's okay to make mistakes. And I'm gonna end up doing everything twice. Don't throw it away. But I did end up gessoing over everything and starting basically from scratch again. So I just gesso over my background with some golden gesso and a catalyst wedge tool. Now, because the Distress Oxide is water reactive, it will interact with the gesso and kind of bleed through, so the background isn't entirely white. On top of the gesso, I also put a layer of absorbent ground to kind of give the background a little bit more tooth, and so the inks could interact maybe a little bit more rather than just sliding around on more of a slick surface from the gesso. Now, the Distress Oxides do not move exactly the same as they do on untreated paper, so keep that in mind. Now make sure you heat set the gesso and the absorbent ground before you start on adding your Distress inks back again. And as before, I smooshed the ink down, sprayed with water, dragged my paper through, and I went ahead and used all the exact same stamps as I did before in the first part. I will just turn some music on and let you guys watch an abbreviated process this time of creating my background. Now, to stamp the quote, I am using first Tim Holtz's collection for Stampers Anonymous, the Grunge Alphabet. I only wanted to use the T, and because this is a giant background stamp, I stamped the T with ink and then masked it off with some post-it tape and then stamped that on the background 3 times to correspond with time, time, time from my quote. For the IME, the EE, and Become, I'm using Tim Holtz collection for Stampers Anonymous Tall Text. I also stamped what's and with Max Stamp Peg's American Typewriter. And since I'm stamping with Distress ink in black soot, I'm able to clean up any of the overstamping that I might have done with my water brush. The Me is using Tim Holtz's Mini Cirque Alpha, and the W again is stamped with the grunge alphabet. Add a little bit more definition to the Me because I thought it was fading into the background a little bit. I grabbed my Pigma Micron pen in the 0.03 and kind of traced over the Me to kind of make it pop out just a little bit. For the final element, I am using Tim Holtz's Timepiece Clock Faces from idea-ology, Tim Holtz's Game Spinners from idea-ology for the clock hands. I grabbed my trusty awl and poked a hole through my paper, making sure to have a pokeable surface underneath because I don't want to poke a hole in my silicone mat. So I just used a small cutting mat that I had. I assembled my clock with the hands and the brad to hold everything in place. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and if you have any questions, be sure to write that down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!